Now, the peace process basically broke down in 2006 in Sri Lanka, and there was a vested interest on the part of the Sri Lankan government in doing so because the Americans under George Bush, the Bush administration, wanted some victory in the war on terror. They weren't getting many victories, but the situation in Sri Lanka offered an opportunity to actually get some runs on the board, so they gave the Sri Lankan government a lot of assistance, both in monetary terms and in military equipment and in training. And it was at around that point that the Sri Lankan government had to bring about an end to that peace process, which occurred with the objective, as we've seen, of conducting a very wide-ranging and broad military operation against the North. But for that, we have to thank George Bush. And it was the Bush administration who pushed and pressed and made it possible for the Sri Lankan government to carry that out. Technically, the Sri Lankan government is bankrupt and has been so for the last 15 years. If it wasn't for aid, and then increasingly for tourism, Sri Lanka would be broke. In fact, when I was there, it was technically bankrupt. So now you've got a situation where the Sri Lankan army is 200,000 strong, and there's plans afoot to recruit another 100,000, and that other 100,000, or the Sri Lankan army, will be used as an army of occupation in the east and the north, and in so doing, Sri Lanka's moved itself much closer to becoming a military/police state. It's where there's less operators in terms of the power distribution, and I would have thought that Sri Lanka might find itself very much a vassal state of China in the not too distant future, and I would have thought that would worry India because the Sri Lankan government, or the Sinhalese in the Sri Lankan government, have shown themselves to be quite not adverse to carrying out acts of terror, and in the future that might be directed against India in ways to be determined by the Chinese, if the power play goes down that path, and who knows. But they're all possibilities, and that one is just one of many scenarios. But from the point of view of the Sinhalese, they may well find that they've lost their, they lose their sovereignty. I think that in approaching what's going on in Sri Lanka, we need to take the view that the Australian government, acting as it used to act, should, through the United Nations and through other avenues, apply whatever pressure it can to ameliorate, to end the conditions that exist in the camps, and to allow the relatives of people in the camps who have relatives in Australia to be processed and come to Australia, and indeed to other countries if that's what they want to do. I urge those people here to make those views known to the Australian government and to their local representatives, and but I don't hold out in the short term much hope of that happening. There's a much greater possibility of change coming about through the sorts of informal media responses that we saw tonight, and that's where the power in bringing about change in Sri Lanka and in other places probably rests. Thanks very much.